There are over 700,000 sexual offenders in the United States alone. With all the social media these days, how can we protect ourselves and our children from these despicable predators?
Welcome to the Voice of the Victim podcast, where we discuss criminal cases that involve some factor of abuse. Our goal is to spread awareness of abuse that could be taking place around any of us and encourage everyone to take responsibility and report if they see a child or an adult being abused. Sam Donaldson was a successful TV journalist for ABC News. He covered major political party conventions from 1964 to 2012. He was voted Best White House Correspondent in 1985 by readers of the Washington Journalism Review and Best Television Correspondent 4 years in a row from 1986 to 1989. He had a very successful career. Along with that, he owned a cattle ranch in Lincoln County, New Mexico, called the Chavez Canyon Ranch. On July 6, 2004, Sam Donaldson was making his way into his ranch to check in on the operations. Sam walked into the ranch home and was shocked with what he found. There was blood dried up onto the floor. It looked like it had been swathed with a mop in an attempt to clean it up. There was broken glass all over the place. That was all Sam Donaldson needed to see. He quickly got out of there and called the police. Well, good morning, Rosie.
Good morning.
How are you today?
I am doing just dandy. How are you?
Well, I'm not great because, as you know, I woke up at 5 a.m. coughing and hacking and allergies. I ran out of allergy pills a couple days ago, and it has not been good for me. So I got a cough and I'm losing my voice, sore throat and stuff, but I'm going to get through this podcast because it is fun to do.
And it's not Tuesday.
That is right, yeah. So if you are a regular listener to this show, you may have noticed that we didn't release an episode on Tuesday. If you remember, a few weeks back, we had talked about starting to release them on Thursday. And this is the week that we are starting to release them on Thursday. Because now it's my day off from work, and it's a lot easier to get the show updated, or
Loaded.
edited. That's what I meant to say. Get the show edited and ready for you to listen to on Thursdays. So we're going to test it out, see how it goes, releasing them on Thursdays, and hopefully that works for your schedule. So let's get into this case.
All right. This story is about Cody Posey, the son of a ranch hand hired by Sam Donaldson, the news correspondent.
If you don't know Donaldson by his name, I'd say look him up because he's actually very recognizable to me. It's the eyebrows. So with that kind of caliber journalist involved, I'm surprised this case isn't more popular.
Let's talk about the Posey family.
Cody was born on October 9th of 1989 to Delbert Paul Posey and Carla Brust Posey. And in 1992, when Cody was 3, his parents filed for divorce, and it turned into a very bitter custody battle between the two parents that lasted 8 years.
During this time, Delbert remarried a woman named Sandy. She got along pretty well with Cody, but this marriage was short-lived. Sandy would divorce him in 1998 for reasons that we'll discuss later.
Carla actually joined the Navy sometime after the divorce, so Cody went to live with his father. But then after serving 4 years, his mother Carla retired from the Navy, and once she got home, the custody battle continued, and in 2000, she was awarded full custody of Cody.
So that seems like a pretty happy ending so far.
Yeah.
He really wanted to be with his mom the whole time.
Yeah, that's the thing, which we'll discuss here.
So 3 months after going to live with his mother, he takes a road trip with his mother and her new husband, who were really good to Cody. They were driving out to Washington.
They were actually on their way out there to start a new life. That was their goal.
But unfortunately, they were involved in a car accident that was so bad the car rolled. His mother was unresponsive and critically injured. She was taken to the hospital. Cody was worried about his mother and kept asking to see her, and they assured him that they were doing all they could and that she would be fine. Cody was only 10 at this point, and he just wanted to see his mother and know she was okay.
Yeah, he was really close to his mother. He was kind of like a mama's boy, so...
Later on, they came to Cody and his stepdad and informed them that she didn't make it.
So this is a tragic, horrifying event for a child. They're on their way to have a family trip to start a new life, and suddenly, out of nowhere, his mother's taken from him. But his stepdad assures Cody that he will take care of Cody and will keep him safe. His stepdad and him had a really good relationship, it sounded like, and he took good care of Cody. But the court informs the stepdad that he has no legal right to be Cody's guardian. So even though he was married to Cody's mom, who had all full custody, and the father had surrendered all parenting rights to her, it's interesting that it wasn't even joint custody, but that full custody had gone to the mother. That's an interesting fact that'll come into play later.
Right. But now Cody's mother is gone, and his stepfather, who loved and cared for Cody, had to tell him that he couldn't care for Cody anymore, and he's sent to live with his father, Delbert, again. So by the time that Cody went back to live with his father, Delbert had remarried once again to a woman named Tryon Schmid.
She was 10 years older than Delbert, and she had a daughter named Marilia, who was a year younger than Cody.
Right. So in 2001, Sam Donaldson, the ABC News correspondent, hired Delbert Paul Posey to take care of his Chavez Canyon Ranch in Hondo, New Mexico. Cody would help his father around the ranch and tending to many duties.
But one hot summer day on July 4th, 2004, Cody would end up killing his entire family on the ranch.
Dun dun dun.
So how did that happen? What would lead someone to do that? Well, apparently Cody's father had slapped him while they were working on the ranch, and this caused Cody to snap. He found his stepsister's saddlebag, which contained a .38 special handgun. He went into the house and found his stepmom reading a book in the living room. He snuck up behind her and shot her twice in the head. The first shot he fired was actually a snake shot, or a rat shot, which is smaller ammo used to kill small animals like snakes and rodents. But the second shot was a bigger, more lethal ammo to, quote, get the job done.
Wow. So now Delbert, Paul, and Marlia heard the gunshots in the house, and they ran inside. Cody shot both of them. In an attempt to dispose of the bodies, Cody dragged them out of the house and loaded them in a bucket of a John Deere backhoe. He drove them over to a nearby property and tried to dig a hole, but the ground was too hard and dry and he couldn't break through it. So he drove them to a nearby manure pile and covered them up with that. Cody changed his clothes and drove his father's pickup truck to a store to buy a can of Sprite. He ended up tossing the gun into a river. Then he drove to a friend's house and hung out there, seemingly in a good mood.
What the heck would possess this 14-year-old kid to suddenly snap and murder his entire family just after a slap from his dad? Let's talk about that. Written link.
I got it.
Sorry, I don't want to get copyright infringement. Okay, so after Sam Donaldson discovered this grisly scene that we talked about at the intro and called the police, they found Cody and brought him in for questioning. At first he claimed he didn't know anything about it, but it only took about an hour, and Cody admitted fully that he did kill them and tells them everything. While he's telling this, he begins talking about his experience with his father. He's telling the police stories of abuse that he had endured while living with his father. The night before the murders, his father had told him to come back to the parents' bedroom, and when he got in there, Delbert was holding a hot metal branding iron and a torch.
Then he told Cody to have sex with his stepmother, Tryon, who was 44 years old. Cody was all like, no way, but then his father started torching the branding iron until it was red hot, and he burned Cody with it. After that, he told him again to have sex with his stepmother. She pulled down the covers, and she was naked. Then she came down to the foot of the bed and pulled Cody's head into her chest. Remember, he's only 14 at this time.
So, what is that, 30 years younger than her?
Yes. He bit her and refused to have sex with her again. So his father, in response, burned him again with a branding iron. After hearing this story, the police checked his body, and he had welts and burns around his shoulders and arms.
So after hearing Cody's statements, the police went to the ranch, and they found the bodies under the manure pile. They find that Cody had broken a window and staged the house to look like it was broken into. They checked out the father's computer, and they saw a lot of strange searches on it that had to do with interesting things, like incest, particularly between a father and a daughter. So this must have been a tough spot for the police, because this 14-year-old boy, he wiped out his entire family in cold blood, there's no denying that, including his 13-year-old sister.
Stepsister.
Yeah, stepsister. And he confessed to it. But he was also seemingly a victim of abuse. So how would they proceed charging him?
Cody was tried in Otero County's Children's Court as a youthful offender, which means under New Mexico law, upon conviction, the judge can decide during sentencing whether it warrants juvenile or adult penalty.
So let's talk about a few of the things that came up during the trial and that Cody told the police.
Okay. Cody was expected to do most of the crap work on the farm, meaning he had to do a lot of cleaning out of the stables. He was punished if he didn't do well enough, and his sister was rewarded for tattling on him if he wasn't doing his chores. If he didn't wake up early enough, Delbert Paul would shock him awake with a cattle prod.
Oof. Well, during the trial, Cody had maintained his composure pretty well, talking about this stuff, but until his defense attorney, Gary Mitchell, had began talking about his mother's death in an opening statement. He described how Cody, his mother, and his stepfather were on their way out to Washington to start a new life, and suddenly she was killed in a terrible car accident. Cody wiped tears from his face as Gary described this. No doubt the hearts of the jury went out to him. His aunt, Corliss Cleese, also cried at the trial as Cody described how he tried so hard to please his father but could never live up to his expectations.
There's some weird names in this podcast.
Yeah, it must be New Mexico.
Cordless? Does she have a cordless phone?
Cleese. So,
anyway.
During Cody's testimony, this is one of the saddest parts, is that he demonstrated how his father would dig a hay hook into the back of his hands if he stumbled at all while he was trying to lift huge bales of hay. If you've ever seen a hay hook, it's like, kind of looks like a pirate hook.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Captain Hook's hook.
Yeah, except bigger and sharper, probably.
I thought it was more dull at the point.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, either way, it's not a great thing to shove into your kid's hand.
No.
And this claim was corroborated by a cowboy from the ranch, W. Slim Britton.
Slim Britton. On the stand, Cody spent 2 days talking about how he had learned early in life not to tell anyone about the abuse, because any time he did, the retribution from his father would far outweigh any benefits or help he would receive, which was none. He actually began to believe himself that he deserved the punishment because he was never able to do it right by his father.
Donaldson had hired another ranch hand to work with the Posey family named Isabel Pilo Vasquez, and he testified about a certain incident where Delbert Paul Posey threatened to cut off his son's balls with a hay hook if he popped the clutch while driving the pickup truck. It's kind of extreme.
Yeah.
Another ranch hand, Eli Salcito, was the father of the boys that Cody was hanging out with after the murder, and he also backed up the statements Cody had made. He witnessed Cody getting beaten by his father. It's said that he was overworked and not given enough food or water.
He also didn't get enough sleep either. He was working like 19-hour days.
Yeah, and woken up with a cattle prod. It's a rough way to wake up. So when you add that on top of the incident with the branding iron and his father trying to force him to have sex with his stepmother, it's a ridiculous amount of abuse.
Right. Cody's cousin, Sherry Gensler, actually recalled the day of Cody's mother's funeral. Cody begged not to return to the custody of his father, but for some reason, the previous custody agreement taking all custody away from the father was declared invalid after Carla Brust's death. And the reason? Because Delbert Paul Posey printed his name on the document instead of signing it in cursive.
What the heck?
Delbert's second wife, Sandra, also testified, saying she'd caught Delbert looking at porn, which supported the defense's claim that he had an incest porn fetish. She described an incident where Delbert told Cody he had to fill a 100-gallon trough with 1 cup. So Cody spent an entire day going back and forth, filling a cup with water and bringing it back to the trough.
A gallon has 16 cups in it? That's 1,600 trips with a cup of water. She had also described how she had shared pictures of Cody after being beaten by a board with his father with the police back in '98, and they never pressed charges against Delbert, so nothing was done about that, and Cody was only 7 at that time. I don't know why police wouldn't have investigated that a bit. It was really a missed opportunity to change the whole trajectory of Cody's life. Sandra also reports this to family services later, but nothing comes from that either.
Wow. We talked about this a few weeks ago with Terrell Peterson, but when authorities have photographic evidence of abuse, why would they not take the time to investigate and try to save a child who might be suffering? Instead, the abuse continued and progressed, and we see where it led. I'm guessing this is a factor that led to Sandra and Delbert divorcing in 1998.
Yeah, and it could have also factored into why Delbert lost all his parental rights in 2000 and surrendered them to Cody's mom, Carla. But then again, here's another missed opportunity because somehow there was no record of that after the mother's death. She died only 3 months after the father surrendered custody, and somehow they didn't factor in these abuse pictures into the equation when they were deciding Cody's guardianship. That's crazy. So, it was also stated that when Cody's stepfather, who was married to Carla, Cody's mom, had to tell him that he wouldn't be able to live with his mom anymore, back when he was sent to live with his father, Cody was devastated, and he was sobbing and crying and really didn't want to go back to his father, Delbert. So this seems like a huge red flag to me for the authorities. Maybe if a kid doesn't want to live with his father that badly, and especially if he had already lost his custody rights previously, maybe that's a reason for a little investigation between that and the photos. But the authorities sent him to live with his father anyway.
Back to the trial. There was a defense psychologist at the trial who stated that Cody reached a point of despair the morning of the shootings, and this greatly impaired his judgment. I looked up what that means, point of despair, and this is what I found. The definition of clinical despair is when despair doesn't dissipate but rather deepens. It takes control of your life and becomes chronic, diminishes the quality of your life, and impairs functioning, keeps you from moving forward. Existential hopelessness and pessimism about life and the future are side effects of clinical despair. The simplistic equation for despair is despair equals suffering minus meaning, meaning the life that you're living no longer has meaning and you're not aware of the cause.
Ooh, that sounds rough.
As we know, despair doesn't have to be clinical. It's a common human experience, and we all feel despair about things in our lives, whether it be marriage, job, love, family, finances, world events. but usually that feeling fades away and life goes on.
In Cody's case, all he saw was all this suffering, and if his life was this kind of quality, what was the point of continuing on?
Right.
He had lost all meaning. So Cody had 37 witnesses that testified in his favor, including the biological father of the 13-year-old girl that he killed. Well, that's really saying something. If the father of the innocent 13-year-old girl you killed is testifying still in your favor. People testified that he was very withdrawn and quiet around his family. And someone he went to school with actually said he was a really fun guy in school, but when his stepsister would come around, he got really uncomfortable and awkward.
Other witnesses said they saw Delbert hit or slap Cody, but they thought nothing of it because they figured it was just a one-time punishment and they didn't feel like they needed to report it. They said if they knew there was long-term abuse, they would have reported it. A former neighbor of Delbert, Paul Posey, testified that when Cody was really young, he witnessed Delbert shaking Cody violently. All this testimony leaves no room for doubt whether these allegations are true. Cody was being abused.
Sandra Grisham was the prosecuting attorney, and she laid out the cold hard facts of the case. She said this was definitely a planned cold-blooded murder plot. Cody ambushed all of his family members and buried them under manure, stole his father's truck, bought a Sprite, ditched the gun, and met up with the friends to play basketball and eat food. And Cody was happier than ever. So this was definitely clearly a premeditated murder, which makes it first degree and pretty much as bad as it gets. We can't argue with that.
Mm-hmm. She also brings up that Cody didn't have to murder anyone, that he could have just reported what was happening. But we need to remember that his abuse had been reported in the past, and that just led to fierce retribution and even harsher abuse from his father.
It's really victim blaming what she's doing. And I think in this case, we see how long-term abuse can really affect a person's judgment. Cody wouldn't have become a killer if not for this abuse. This is 100% nurture case of violence. But it just goes to show how much abuse can affect your mental state and your judgment to be able to justify murder in your head. He actually gave reasons for why he had to kill each person. He shot Tryon first to keep her from calling 911 because she was in the home. Then he shot his intended target, his father. And then he shot his stepsister to keep her quiet because, as we had talked about before, she was actually rewarded for tattling on him.
Yeah, this girl was shaped into a narc by her parents, but she was only 13 years old, and she shouldn't have had to die.
Yeah, to me that's the biggest tragedy in this case, and I'm sure everyone feels that way, is that she shouldn't have died.
Right, but again, that shows how the abuse can warp someone's judgment so much. Like the psychologist said, Cody was experiencing a point of despair.
Yeah. Delbert Paul Posey's brother, Verlin Posey, refuted Cody's testimony, saying that he never witnessed any interactions between Delbert and Cody that would lead him to suspect an abusive relationship. But he also testified that their family was just full of tough men, and this slapping around was just normal behavior to him, and that's how they were raised. Now, this next fact wasn't part of the trial, but it's information that came out after the trial about Verlin and Delbert's father. He was actually a very abusive person. He would beat his wife and kids.
At one point, he pushed his wife out of a moving car. She would end up shooting him in his sleep, and then took her own life. This was Cody's grandma, so he wasn't the only person in his family that was so distraught from abuse and felt the need to kill to get away from it. And we see that this abuse was part of how Delbert was raised.
Yeah, so maybe there was a little bit of nature there too.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, the fact that two different people in one family committed murder after being abused, but she also committed suicide. So, man, what a sad story.
People may say that this abuse is the perfect alibi for someone to try to get away with murder, but Cody had 37 witnesses giving detailed accounts of incidents of abuse between Cody and his father. So this obviously was not a made-up alibi.
Yeah, clearly Cody was wrong to have killed his family to escape this abuse, but this abuse drove him so crazy that he justified it in his mind. Not only killing his abusers, but an innocent 13-year-old girl who was conditioned to tattle on him whenever he messed up. So, let's talk about the sentencing. On February 7th, 2006, Cody was sentenced after being convicted of first-degree murder for his stepsister, second-degree murder for his stepmother, and voluntary manslaughter for his father, and also 4 charges of evidence tampering. He was sentenced as a juvenile to remain in juvenile detention until age 21. So he got 7 years for 3 murders, which really seems like nothing just hearing the cold hard facts, but I really need to hand it to the judge for being understanding of someone who suffered so much abuse.
If he would have gotten more time, I would have been okay with that too, but this is the way the court decided, and that's that.
Yep.
In September of 2006, Miami attorney Jack Thompson filed a wrongful death lawsuit.
Thompson?
Yeah, that's what it says.
Have you ever heard of the word Thompson?
Well, why is it with a TH then?
That is a really good question. You know what? You're actually right. Why is it TH? Continue.
In September of 2006, Miami attorney Jack Thompson filed a wrongful death lawsuit on behalf of the surviving Posey relatives against Cody and against Grand Theft Auto creator Rockstar Games, publisher Take-Two Interactive, and PlayStation manufacturer Sony. The lawsuit claimed that Cody Posey was trained by the video game GTA Vice City to be more aggressive and a more efficient killer.
To me, that sounds like the weakest lawsuit ever, because millions of people play those games and don't become murderers. But what can you do?
A lot of people online and involved in this trial say that he's a cold-blooded murderer and he will kill again. In 2010, Cody Posey was released from detention, and 8 years later, he still hasn't broken the law again. He actually wanted to go to college and turn his life around.
And it is understandable that Delbert's family would want to file a lawsuit because their brother was murdered and they want someone to pay for it. But what do you think about this case? Listening to this, definitely feel free to email us at vovpodcast@gmail.com because we're really curious about your personal feelings on this case. If Cody Posey I can't talk, deserved more time, or if he deserved to be sentenced as an adult, or whatever. I'm just really curious. Also, I want to thank you for listening to this, and if you did enjoy it, definitely give us a 5-star rating in Apple Podcasts, because we'd really appreciate that. Well, what do you think? Have anything else to say about this case?
I think that people in New Mexico have different names than we do in Minnesota.
Yeah, they're kind of interesting.
I think that Cody Posey got the right sentencing. I don't think it was okay to kill his whole family, but I understand why he did.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really sensitive topic, because obviously being abused like this, the proper punishment for it isn't death. You wouldn't put someone to death for if they were actually charged with the abuse, but it's just the way it happened, and we feel bad for the surviving family members that lost their family. But again, I'd like to reiterate the fact that the 13-year-old girl's father, biological father, stood up for Cody in court, and he saw what Delbert Paul Posey was like, and the way he treated Cody. So,
did you get any information about the incest, about father and daughter? Did anything ever happen to the 13-year-old girl that was found?
No, not that was in the evidence, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. The thing that sucks is that we'll never know because they're both dead. Yeah, that is an interesting thing to think about, especially if he was looking at porn that involved a father and a daughter incesting. Is that the right word?
I don't think so, but you get the point across.
But yeah, who knows what that poor girl who ended up getting murdered might have been also dealing with. I mean, if she was rewarded for tattling on her brother, that might have been like the focus of her life because it was the one thing that her parents might have made her feel good about, especially if they were abusing her as well. So, yeah, I hadn't even thought of that, but it's entirely possible. Again, let us know what you think. If you have any further discussion on the case, you can always tweet us, too, at VOVPod on Twitter.
Or follow us on Instagram.
Yeah, VOV Podcast on Instagram. But thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.